We'll go through the call to order process here. So just a reminder, the antitrust policy for SAR states that our members agree not to discuss commission rates, disparage business of trade of anyone else, boycott or concert refusals to deal, or discuss or make an effort to divide or allocate territories or customers, or limit the nature of business carried on or products or services sold or to be sold. That was a mouthful, I know. If you didn't catch all that, come talk to me. I'm happy to explain it to you. Just remember, we're not going to talk about commissions in group settings like this, nor are we going to have a group boycott over any company. Dave, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? If you're able to stand right now, please do so.
Okay, please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dave, for leading us in that pledge. It's definitely important. Anyway, I will point everyone to the chat. Spencer's posted our agenda and a link there. So if you would like to take a look at our agenda for today, you're welcome to do so by going into the chat. A few quick announcements from SAR. If you didn't know, we are still having our regional meetings every Tuesday. We're doing it virtually. Those start at 9 a.m. and run till about 10 a.m. Always great information. The link is on the agenda. It's also available on the SAR website, which is www.sacrealtor.org. So make sure you go there and join into our regional meetings. A couple of classes coming up. We do have a free online training with 6 advanced LinkedIn tips for real estate professionals. That's coming up next week on Wednesday, June the 10th, starting at 10 a.m. It's a 1-hour class. That link is also in our agenda for you. And one more free online training class, Social Marketing Strategies. That's Thursday of next week, June the 11th, from 10 to 12. And again, that link is available in on our agenda, as well as on the Sacramento Association of Realtors website. I do want to take a minute to remind you that we have released our slate of candidates for leadership at SAR, as well as the board of directors. You will be voting in the middle of July. And this morning, we do have one of our candidates here to speak to you. So Dell, go ahead and take it away.
Kelly, thank you very much for allowing me to do this. Good morning, everyone. My name is Del Barbray, and I am running for 2021 Secretary Treasurer of the SAR Board. I am proud to be a Realtor. I am proud to be a member of SAR. I have the experience to be the 2021 Secretary Treasurer, and my experience includes serving as a director on the SAR Board for the 5th consecutive year, serving on the SAR Government Relations Committee for the 4th consecutive year, graduating from the SAR Leadership Academy, past chair of the SAR Education Committee, past chair and vice chair of the SAR Volunteer Coordinating Committee, past vice chair of the SAR Marketing Communications Committee and the Housing Opportunity Committee. I am committed and passionate about SAR, and I want to continue to help make a difference at SAR. So please vote for me, Del Barbray, for 2021 Secretary Treasurer of the SAR Board. Thank you for voting for me. And as Kelly said, voting will begin on July 20th and end at 4:30 p.m. on August the 4th, 2020. So please vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Del. We appreciate you being here this morning and introducing yourself. I do want to also make sure that I'm giving you all a quick update about our board meeting last month, just a couple of weeks ago or so here. One exciting piece of information I want to make sure you're all aware of, because you'll start seeing us roll it out, is our new and updated strategic plan for SAR. We had a strategic planning retreat back in March, just before we all went into shelter in place. It's got some really exciting goals and strategies that we're going to implement at our association. I think you'll find some good changes. Some of those, our 5 goals, our 5 main goals are engage, advocate, elevate, outreach, and lead. And we've got specific strategies in each of those goals to help us make sure that we're maintaining that position here in our community and within our association. I also want to let you know, if you hadn't seen, that SAR is reopened. So make sure you're making an appointment. Member services in the retail store is available to you weekdays. We are practicing social distancing guidelines, so you'll need to make sure you're bringing a mask. We will check your temperature when you walk in the door. You'll need to sanitize your hands. but we are here for you. We are open for you. So make sure you're checking in. You can make an appointment through the SAR website as well. And then also for our affiliate members who are on the call, we're postponing your dues this year. So normally your dues are going out right about now and due July 1st. President Judy Covington has put together a task force to evaluate our affiliate membership. We always want to make sure we're bringing high value to all of you since you are so valuable to us. So we're going to take a couple of months and really dive deep into our affiliate membership and make sure that we're bringing you the most bang for your buck. So luckily for you, that means you don't have to pay your dues for an extra couple of months. So those are some of the decisions that were made at the board level this last month. We want to make sure that you are aware of. Thank you so much for indulging me. Next up on our agenda is CEO of Metrolist Services, everyone's favorite, Mr. Bill Miller. Bill, don't forget to unmute.
Okay, well, that was a false start. Anyway, thank you for the kind words, Kelly. And I started to say, I know that some of you are missing the donuts this morning. So anyway, happy to be here. I just typed my email address into the chat box. So if you have any questions, you can email me. I don't want to take the time out of the meeting today because we've got some important stuff to cover. But if you do have some questions, please give me an email and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. Also, hopefully by now you have received our Wednesday update email that we are sending to everybody. But there is a video in there that I put together and it explains a lot of the upcoming stuff, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But we do have some exciting things that we're releasing. And if you haven't seen it this week, we released to the Prospector MLS system, the CMA that is part of the core MLS system. And it's always been pretty much, for lack of a better term, a down and dirty CMA, very quick, well, to accomplish. Rapatoni's been hard at work, and the CMA has matured very nicely, and it's part of your fees. We're actually seeing more people now using the Prospector CMA than are using the WR Studio Cloud CMA. So you might want to check it out if you haven't checked it out. Then next week, we're going to be releasing an update to the hot sheets. And I know that many of you over the years have set yourself up on auto prospecting so that you can get the information that as it comes into certain farm areas or where you really specifically want to see stuff as soon as it comes in to the MLS system. And you didn't have the ability, you had the ability to set up hot sheets, but not to set them up so that you would get that information immediately. You now have the ability to go in and set yourself up in a hot sheet situation and get that stuff sent to you via the hot sheet as it comes into the system. So you want to check that out as well. And then during this COVID-19 health crisis, we've had a situation where, for instance, CAR's asking you to post certain information to the MLS system, as well as the entrance to a home that you potentially are showing. And I know that SAR has done a great job of keeping you abreast of those things. So we've suspended some of our rules to accommodate the ability for you to do that. And if you put that information in like agent remarks, what's happening is the major portals are stripping that information out. And part of the CAR directive is that it needs to be available for the public. So Zillow and Realtor.com and all of them don't want us putting any links or any information that may take that consumer away from their website. So they strip all of that stuff out of the marketing remarks. And of course, they don't generally publish the agent remarks. So our recommendation is take a photo, take a picture with your smartphone, and then post that to your listing, and then it'll be in the photo array, and that accommodates the fact that the public will see that. In addition to that, in the past, attached documents have some standard labels, and as you scan those documents, if you don't label them right then and there, and they're not one of the standard labels that they've developed, it goes in as other. And then you can't go back and change that. So the software will be updated. We'll release it next week, where you'll have the ability to scan documents and put whatever label you want on it. And in fact, once you start viewing those documents, you can go back and revise them and put a new label on them. So if it has anything to do with COVID-19, they're attached to the listing, and any other requirements that you want in the attached documents. You can make it very clear to the agent searching your listing. And then in the video I want to get my counts up on YouTube, so everybody go there, maybe they'll start paying me, right? Hopefully everybody chuckled there. But I go into depth on 3 major improvements and enhancements and releases that we're going to have between now and the fourth quarter of 2020. And that is within probably the next 30 to 45 days, we're going to release to you a new login procedure that we know will make your lives easier when you're going to Prospector, and it's going to allow you to go directly to things you want to do, but it also is going to be some better messaging, and then also you'll be able the ability to go to other places, like DRE will be right there if you need to go to DRE. We also, something I've talked about to this group, we are going to have a release date, a firm release date for RE California in the next week or so, and we'll start preparing all of you for that. But we've had it in testing, it is working, it's working very well, and we just want to make sure that we release it at a time that's not going to interfere with all of you hopefully getting to ramp up your business as we come out of this COVID-19 health crisis. But look for information on that. We'll start explaining all of that to you. And again, if you watch the video, I've got more information there for you. And the final one is Remine. And I believe I've talked to this group again about Remine in the past. And Remine is really something that's going to complement the Rapatoni system. Its most important aspect is predictive analytics. It's got some incredible videos, maps and overlays, heat maps, trending software to show you what's going on in neighborhoods. And it also really has some very deep demographic information and information regarding, again, the predictive part about what homes may be potentially be up for sale in the next 3 months, next 6 months, the next 12 months. Again, really in-depth information that you can share with your buyers and seller regarding the market, what's going on in the market, and more importantly, drilling down to the neighborhood level. So watch the video. We at Metrolist appreciate your support and want to encourage all of you to be well and be safe. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Bill. As always, we appreciate you and Metrolist keeping us informed and keeping us at the top of our game here in our area. It's so appreciated. And if you guys didn't know, we actually have Bill slated as our next broker manager speaker. So you'll have even more in-depth information from us next month directly from Bill Miller himself. That date will be July 31st, starting at 9:30 a.m. And without further ado, let's get to our main speaker of the day. Should need no introduction, but your CEO, Dave Tanner, here at SAR is going to give us a forms update. If you didn't know, we've had a few forms released over the last several weeks, and Dave's going to keep us in the know on all of that information. Dave, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Kelly. And we're going to start off. Can you see the form on the screen there now? Screen share is working. Okay. For the elderly technology challenged people, we never know whether we're where we need to be or not. So we're going to start off talking first about the regular June 2020 release of forms. There's 2 new forms and there's some revised forms. We'll go through all of those, and then after we finish with the septic tank, which is the last form, then we'll go on and look at the changes to the COVID forms and the CAR instructions, or the state laws that apply to those and their proper use. So we're going to start off first with this form, which is entitled Property Visit and Home and Open House Advisory. This is a form that, unfortunately, I'm concerned people may think that it's a COVID-related form. It is not a COVID-related form at all. This is a form that's been in discussion and talked about for about 1.5 years now, and they created it. If you look at the form, the Property Visit and Open House Advisory, it tells the visitor that, number one, that there may be audio and or video recording of their visit. This is particularly important if you have a buyer that starts talking about, oh, gee, we just love this house, let's write a full price offer on it. Probably not the sort of thing you want to have the seller hearing before you present your offer. Kind of changes the negotiating strategy a little bit. Also you could be talking negatively about something in the house. You know, look at this. Oh, you know, these people do this kind of stuff, and you know, when you hear that, then you're probably not going to get much of a chance to buy that house either. So you need to know, because good common sense says you would never talk about the property inside the property anyway, but this just does warn them that it may be recorded. Also, the second part there is about visitor safety, talking about you're not familiar with the property, so watch out for changes in elevation, watch out for that step down between the living room and the family room that you didn't notice. Don't fall off of there. And also talks about if you're wearing booties, slip-on booties, that they may be slippery. Talks about the risk of pets, that you may be allergic to them or they may be dangerous. Talking about making sure that you keep track of your children and don't let them break anything or get into trouble. So this is a great forum. I think that anytime you're going to start showing property to clients, you ought to have them sign this form, and you just keep it, and later on you'll put it in the file. But also, I think you should have these at an open house. Anytime anybody comes into the open house, has them sign the form so that you're telling them that that may be recorded. You know, the recommendation is always that the seller have that notice up there in the door, but not all sellers put a notice like that up in the door telling people that it's that they may be recorded. So I think there's a responsibility on the part of you in showing people property that you revise them of that. Again, I want to stress this is not a COVID-related form. It has nothing to do with the current COVID environment. That's something that hopefully people will start using as they move forward. Okay. The next one is a square foot and lot size disclosure and advisory. A lot of this is really not that much of an issue for us, or shouldn't be, because in Metrolist, when you put the square footage into the screen, it automatically indicates the source of the information. The default information would be the assessor, or if you enter information manually yourself, you have the ability to put the information in. But sometimes there's differences. And for instance, if you have square footage information on the property that is different from what's in the assessor records, and you decide to override it and put that in, then the potential buyer doesn't know what the square footage is in the assessor records, but later on they may find out. And then they'll say, why did you tell me it was this when the assessor record says it was this? So this form gives you the opportunity, when you have those different lot sizes or square footage of the property, you can put down there what is listed there, and you also have a place where you can have additional information. So if there was maybe a addition put on and the assessor records did not pick up the addition when it was completed, you could put that information in there so that they will know. So it may be in a lot of properties that this will never be an issue, but if you have one of those properties where you have various square footages available, this is a great way to make full disclosure to a buyer so you don't have to worry about getting sued later on by them saying you didn't tell me. So we'll move on to, and those are the two new forms. The rest of the forms we're going to look at here are revisions to forms. The first one on the revision forms, everything that's changed is in red. As you can see, a good part of this form is in red. It was modified so that it could be used for properties that are covered as well as not covered under the Tenant Protection Act. They did some modifications last year when Tenant Protection Act came out, but then it made it difficult because you had one form that was for covered properties and one that wasn't for covered properties. So they modified the form now so that you can use it for a property either that is or is not covered by the Tenant Protection Act. And there's also a reminder down there to that it's the responsibility of the property owner to investigate and determine whether their property is or is not exempt from the TPA. Remember, the TPA has various exemptions. One of those is if it was built in the last 15 years. One of them if it's single family and owned by individuals. So there are a lot of exceptions to being covered by the TPA. So it's important to know the law says that if your property is exempt from TPA and you want to be able to increase rents, the tenant has to have been notified that the property is exempt from the TPA at the time that they moved into the property. Otherwise, it's unfair later to come back and tell them that you're not subject to it and you can increase the rents as much as you want to. So this is one step in that. The next form that we're going to look at is the notice to quit form. And again, this is the same thing. It's covered to make the form apply. You can see that there's a lot of information there in the middle that's been crossed out because that was all related to the TPA form. And of course, one of those things, TPA passed last year. Everything was brand new and we wanted to make sure people knew about it. And now the TPA is a year old and most people are at least familiar with its existence. Then it's time to make the forms more appropriate and easier to use. So you see a lot of that at the middle there was taken out and a lot of information at the bottom about non-curable breaches. So when you give them notice, you say, you know, you didn't sign and these are non-curable breaches. And so you are going to be, your tenancy is going to be terminated. Okay, the next one is the notice of termination of tenancy. And again, this has the same type of changes. It was modified to cover both covered and uncovered properties under the TPA. So if you're doing property management, if you're renting out your own properties, then you want to actually pull up these forms, take a look at them, see what the changes are. If you're not involved in rental properties, then of course these forms are not going to have much significance for you. Okay, the next form we're going to look at is the notice to cure or quit. And again, this is related to the curing of a breach of the covenants under the lease or rental agreement. And likewise, it was modified to cover properties that are both covered and not covered under TPA. So you can see there's a whole lot of stuff there that's spelled out. The first one had to do, this one rather, the paragraph in the middle of the second page has to do with properties or tenancies that are not subject to the TPA. Because if it's not subject to the TPA, then it's much easier to be able to modify the terms of the agreement. Okay, the next one is in the representative capacity signature for buyer representatives. This is the one where if the buyer was either a trust or some other type of entity that they signed saying that I'm signing my name on this form as Dave Tanner, or on all the documents in the transaction, I'm signing as Dave Tanner, but every time I sign as Dave Tanner, I'm actually signing Dave Tanner as president of the XYZ Corporation, so that you don't have to worry about the contracts not being signed appropriately. What they've done now is they have added a provision in the back. So if you do an assignment of the contract to some other entity, it has a place here for them to sign for the agreeing to the representative capacity on the assignment as well. So if you're never doing a property with a representative capacity and it subsequently is being assigned to another party, then you don't need to worry about that change at all. Next one we're going to look at is a residential listing agreement. This is a listing agreement that the change to the listing agreement, there's a couple of things here about the leased and liened properties, just changing the title to them in 4B. But the major change was down in paragraph 7, where they added the provision about the clear cooperation policy. And it says MLSs require, or there's a place there, or there's a checkbox, do not require. If you are putting the property in Metrolist at the present time, clear cooperation policy has not been adopted, so you are not subject to clear cooperation. You should check the box there in 7A saying that you are not required to, under the provisions of clear cooperation, that as soon as you start marketing it, within 24 hours, it must be entered into the MLS. NAR adopted this as a mandatory policy, and every MLS that is entirely association owned is required to have adopted the clear cooperation policy by May 1st. And so most of the MLSs in the state are association owned and all required to adopt the clear cooperation policy. 2 exceptions to that in our area is that Barris is broker owned and Metrolist is 50% broker and 50% association owned. So those 2 are not required to adopt the clear cooperation policy. When this policy came out, we knew that it was going to be controversial. And so Metrolist decided not to move forward with adopting the clear cooperation policy until we had a chance to analyze its impact and what happened. It became policy on May 1st. On May 7th, TAN, which is a group of brokers that share listings without putting them on the MLS, filed a lawsuit and named NAR, CAR, and the San Francisco Association, which had adopted the policy. So Metrolist wisely had not adopted the policy at that time and therefore was not named as a defendant in the suit. And I would imagine that Metrolist probably will not be looking at adopting the clear cooperation policy until such time as that lawsuit sorts itself out and we find out how the court's going to feel about it. So if you're listing a property that's going to be listed in Metrolist, which I assume most of you are, on paragraph 7A of the RLA, you want to be sure you check the box, that says that our rules do not require that it be submitted within 1 day. And then in 7E, it talks about the policy as well. And then on the others there, you can see some changes in titles of sections just for clarification. But the significant change to the form is the adding of the clear cooperation, and in Metrolist area that does not apply to us, so you want to be sure you check that box in 7A saying that it does not apply to our listings. Okay. 2 more to go on the revised listing part. The next is the seller instruction to exclude the listing from the MLS. Of course, sellers have always been able to exclude the listing from the MLS if they want to. So this is the SELM form where the seller says that they can exclude it. On this form, if you're going to exclude a listing, the first part there that's different is on paragraph 2A. You want to check the box there again saying that we're not under the clear cooperation requirements. And then under the clear cooperation requirement, it provides must be submitted within 1 day of any public marketing of the property. So B and C there go on to talk about what the definition is of public marketing. Metrolist has adopted a definition of public marketing, and it's in the MLS rules. So you can look in there and determine what public marketing is. And public marketing does apply in some other aspects within Metrolist, such as if you have elected not to put the property in the market, you've done a delayed entry date, you have a restriction on public marketing. And the last thing I want to mention on this form, because you'll look at it if you're going to be using it to exclude properties. In paragraph 5 there, you want to check saying that MLS has not adopted the clear cooperation policy. So there's 2 places you need to check for that. The last thing is there's 3 choices in the bottom about do not submit the listing to the MLS. The first one is for a period of so many calendar days from the commencement of the listing. So that one's fine, you can put that one in. Or the second one is until a specific date, and that one's fine, you can put that one in. But option C says during the entire listing period provided for in the agreement, you cannot use option C in Metrolist. The reason is when you submit this form to Metrolist, when you submit this form to Metrolist, and you'll do that through your service center, they make an entry into the Metrolist computer. It can't be seen by outside parties, it can be seen by staff, saying that it's excluded for 15 days, and so they'll note that, or it's been excluded until a date certain, and they'll put that date into the computer. Then if somebody calls and says that they saw a listing down the street with a sign in front of it and it's being offered for sale, and it's not in the MLS, because even though we don't have the clear cooperation rule that you must have it within 1 day of when you do public marketing, we still have the rule that says it must be submitted or excluded within 3 days. And so if somebody calls and files a complaint saying there's been a sign up on that property for a week and it's not in the MLS can go in and look, and they can see that the property has been excluded either for a certain number of days or until a date certain. As long as that date is not expired, the listing broker is not in violation. The reason you cannot use C, it says for the entire listing period, and Metrolist at that point has no idea what your listing period is. So they would have no way of putting in an entry which would exempt the listing broker from being cited for not loading the property into Metrolist. So you can use either A or B, either one of those is fine. On C, you cannot use C because it doesn't give. And so what would happen if you submitted one in C, they would send it back to you and give you, I think, 24 hours to correct it and send it back. So it's easier just to do it right the first time. You do not have to use the SELM form. Metrolist has their own form for excluding, so you can either use the Metrolist form or use the SEL form, either one, except if you use the SEL form, you cannot use option C for exclusion. Okay, and the last form, as I mentioned, is the septic. And so this is a septic well inspection, and there's some changes there that have made to it. And one of those is that paragraph B, because those are all checks that you would, check marks, they're options. In paragraph B, you can, rather than doing a full inspection and providing that, you can just agree that the seller will pay for identifying the location of the septic tank rather than having to do a full inspection. So the one before only gave the option of full inspection. It didn't give the option for you to just mark the tank and say, there's where it is, which is an option that you have now in B. So if you think everything's working fine and you don't care about having it inspected, you can tell the seller that you want them to mark the location of it so that you know where it is. Marking the location, that's very important if you're thinking about possibly after you buy the property, you're going to do some modifications to the backyard, maybe want to put in a swimming pool. You kind of like to know where the septic tank is before you start digging. Those generally don't function when you have them in the same location. So that is a way to ask just to have that location of the tank spotted for you rather than have a full inspection. So that's it on the standard, new, and modified forms. For probably the greater majority of you folks, there may only be one or two forms on there that have any impact on you at all. The rest of them, probably not. I would encourage you to make sure that you do start using that first form that we looked at, the property visitation form, because that does protect you from potential lawsuits later on if something untoward happens. So now we're going to move on and look at the COVID forms that have been revised once again to change the content. Now, I'll give you some background on why this got revised once again. CAR come out of a lot of these forms and they were recommended forms. And what they did is they took the requirements of the state law and they pretty much based their forms on those. But then the governor and the Department of Real Estate got together, I should say the governor's staff. I'm sure that he had absolutely nothing personally to do with it. But the governor's staff and DRE negotiated the terms for showing of property, things like that. They published their regulations, which were different from the guidelines that CAR had published. And CAR thought in many cases their guidelines were excessive in that they required you to wear gloves anytime you went into a property. They required you to wear shoe coverings. And we said, well, those can be recommended, but they should not be a requirement. Somebody should not be cited for a violation of DRE regulations for not wearing gloves when they're going through a property. So they negotiated a lot of changes, and those changes are now reflected in the new documents that they've created, the COVID documents. Most of the items that are in the COVID documents now are also in DRE regulations, which means that if you don't do the things that are required in these documents, you could be cited from the Department of Real Estate for violating California real estate law. So when CAR come out with their guidelines, which we'll look at in a couple minutes, when they published their guidelines initially, they were just that. They were guidelines by CAR. Now what's in the guidelines, the name of the document has been changed, and we'll look at it, as said, in a minute. Although it is still the BPPP form, rather than being best practices guidelines, which used to be the title, it's now entitled Mandatory Government Showing Requirements, including best practices guidelines and prevention plan. And again, all of these were updated in zip forms as of 2 days ago. So if you've gone into zip forms in the past 2 days to look at these forms, you're already looking at these revised forms. But if you haven't gone in the past 2 days, if you printed some other ones out, you should know now the ones you had before are no longer consistent with California law, and you should look at revising and using the new ones. The first form we're going to look at is the listing agreement, coronavirus addendum or amendment, the RLA-CAA form. This has been revised in the part that in this document, the seller agrees to follow the BPPP requirements for the property, and they also acknowledge receipt of the PDS, which is the seller's copy of the PED form. So in this document, they agree to follow the BPPP, and they acknowledge receipt of the PDS, and both of those print out automatically with the RLA-CAA. So when you print out this listing agreement amendment, it will automatically print out those other two documents. So the fact that they acknowledge receipt of them is not going to be a problem because it's going to be right there with the document when you print it out. The next form that's changed is the Pds form. And what's different in the Pds form is that the seller agrees to abide by the listing broker's BPPP. Now, in several places in these documents, it says that it refers to the BPPP form, which is the one that CAR has created, and you can use as your plan. The law requires that every broker have a prevention plan for every property that they have. And so all this stuff is cross-referenced back and forth. But when you post the notice on the door, which is required, and we'll get to that a little later, it references the BPPP form. Now, some brokers have chosen to go out on their own and create their own prevention plan. If they do that, then it says on the forms that they have to give that document to the purchaser as well. So the visitor or the seller. So if you're using the CAR BPPP form, that's great. The documents are all taking care of it. It's referencing it. If your broker has chosen to create their own plan, then they're going to have to also provide that, and they're going to have to reference that plan in these other documents. So easiest way to go is use the BPPP. Also the BPPP, if there's any change in the state requirements, the form will be revised to have a track with any changes in the requirements. If your brokerage is doing their own, then they're going to have somebody track that individually, because while these, as I mentioned earlier, these used to be guidelines before, these now are required by state law, and so you don't want to be running in violation and put, if a problem comes up later, have problems arise in that regard. Okay. Next form we're going to look at is the BPPP form, which is a 5-page document. It starts here. One of the things you'll notice when we get to page 5 is there are no signature lines on this form anymore, because they're already acknowledging receipt of it. The seller's acknowledging receipt of it when they sign the CAA form, and the buyer is acknowledging receipt of it on their PED form. So there's no reason to have a separate signature line in the BPP. It's just going to print out automatically and you just give it to them. Also in the BPP, they agree to follow the Pd form. Okay, so I talked about the part about you having to have your own, if you create your own BPP form, then you're going to have to make sure you're in compliance with state law. So we'll just go through this form quickly here. And as I mentioned, when you go back to page 5, you see there's no signature lines or acknowledgement of receipt. It's just an advisory form that comes automatically attached with the PED, and acknowledgement of receipt is included in the PED. Okay, so we will move on then to the other PED form, the PEAD-V, which is the form that every visitor to the property, whether they're a potential buyer, whether they're an inspector, an appraiser, or whatever, everybody that's going to enter the property needs to sign a PED-V form and electronically transmit that to the listing broker before entering the property. In the PED-V form, the visitor agrees to comply with the PRE, which we'll look at later, the property rules for entry, and the visitor agrees to the terms of the BPP, which I mentioned prints out automatically with the PED. So when you print out the PED, that form is going to be with it. The best way to make sure, because a listing broker has an obligation to make sure that no one enters the property without signing a PED-V. In the RLA-CAA, which is the amendment to the listing agreement, the seller agrees to allow people to enter the property as long as they have signed the PED-V before they enter. If you allow somebody to enter without signing that form, you have breached your fiduciary duty to the buyer, because they said don't let anybody in without signing it. It's very important because in the PED-V, the person signing says, I'm not currently sick. I haven't been with anybody that has coronavirus in the past 14 days. I agree to follow and all the safety things that are included. They agree to provide all of that. So the law says that you need to send the executed form for each person entering the property to the listing broker before showing. The best way to ensure that you get that is to use the CVS code on your lockbox. If they don't send you the PED-V form, they don't have a code to get in. That's your positive control as a listing broker. There is potentially very significant liability of a listing broker if you don't follow these rules. If you let somebody enter that property without signing a PED-V form, so they did not certify that they're not sick, they didn't certify that they haven't been with somebody that's been diagnosed with coronavirus in the past 14 days, they are actually carrier. They go into that property, they leave some virus around in that property. The seller comes home and they pick it up and somebody gets sick or God forbid dies. The lawsuit about you allowing somebody into that property without satisfying the instructions of the seller can be significant. So you gotta make sure that you do it, and the best way to do it is use a CVS code on all the listings. If they don't give you the PED-V form before they enter, you don't give them the code, they don't get to enter. I know I come on strong in some of these things sometimes because I've been an attorney for over 40 years and I know the ugly things that can happen if you don't follow the rules. So just follow the rules. They are not hard to comply with at all. You have them sign the form and you send it to them. You're out at the property and you decide they're going to see another property and you got to do it. Well, you have to send it electronically. So you have the visitor sign the form at the property, you take a picture of it on your smartphone and you send it to the listing broker. And now you're covered. You can document that you've had it done. So it's not that hard to do. Don't be lazy. Don't think, well, nothing's ever going to happen, because when you take the position, nothing's ever going to happen, that's when something always happens. So just take care of protecting your client, take care of protecting everybody else involved in the transaction, and protect, of course, the health and safety of everybody. Okay, the last thing we're looking at here is the PRE form, the property rules for entry. This is a 2-page document. The first is this page here. It says all persons entering this property agreed to these posted rules. That must be posted by the door to the property. It's not an optional thing, it's a state law. The state regulations say you must post this information next to the form. You see the little pictographs there? There was an earlier version of this form which showed people wearing gloves and wearing booties, and they have revised that because that's no longer the law that you must do those. It's only recommended that you do those. And so the pictographs have been changed to show the rules as they apply. So you'll have this posted on the door. You'll also have the second one posted on the door, which is this sign. And this sign also is posted there, and all visitors to the property must abide by the following rules. And again, in a different format, it restates all of the rules. The way the rules are written now, you must have both of those posted on the outside of your property if you're going to allow anybody to enter into it. So if you have a listing, if you don't have them up there now, you need to print out these 2 forms. It's the PRE form, property rules for entry. They must be posted at the front door to the property. And at the top of the PRE form, it references the broker's prevention plan. So it's the BPP or another plan if the broker has their own. As Bill was mentioning earlier too, this form, the PRE, must be uploaded to the MLS for all listings. So you can either upload it to the documents, or you can do the workaround that Bill suggested there about taking a picture of it and putting it in your photo gallery with your listing. But one way or the other, it doesn't, the rules don't specify, but they say that it must be uploaded to the listing. The idea being that that information will be given to the potential buyer prior to them entering the property. So either way, you can resolve that. The law also says at the present time that the listing broker is responsible by law to provide masks, hand sanitizer, disinfecting wipes, and to open all interior doors, turn on the lights, wipe all mobility features, wipe surfaces, light switches, banisters, bathrooms, sinks, all of these things. It is the responsibility of the listing broker by law in the state of California. Now, going back to the first form that we looked at, the RLA-CAA, on that form, there is 2 optional boxes you can check. One, the seller agrees to be responsible for paying for those supplies. The second is the seller authorizes the listing broker to pay a third party to satisfy all of those requirements, to provide the supplies and to do the screening and everything. You know, as a practical matter, the listing broker cannot do these things unless they are going to be at the property at the time it's being shown. You would have to be there immediately after the showing in order to sanitize the property before the next person enters. If you have more than one listing, that's probably not going to be a possible task for you, as busy as we have been the past couple of weekends with people showing properties. So you're going to have to find some way to do it, because by law, it is the listing broker's responsibility to make sure that that happens. So as a listing broker, you got to figure out how you're going to do that. Okay, and finally, on all of these forms, there is information that can be obtained by going to the CAR website. Go to covidupdates.org/webinars. And there are webinars on there that explain all of these new forms. Now, if you go onto a webinar, make sure that you are looking at webinars from June, because webinars in May will talk about forms that are no longer the applicable forms. Make sure you're looking at the June webinars, and they will talk to you in great detail. There's one on there, I think the newest one on there that has the newest version of all of these forms has Neil Kalin and Robert Bloom doing the presentation and talking about the requirements of the form and pretty much saying in more detail the things that I've just covered here briefly. So I would encourage you to become informed. The important thing is that these are no longer guidelines. These are no longer suggestions. These are part of DRE regulations. They are part of state law. You don't have the option to say, I'm not going to bother doing that. You could potentially lose your license as well as getting sued. I'm probably not going to see anybody get criminally cited for it, but you could be sued by an individual. You could be called before DRE for a hearing on possible loss of your license for not following the DRE regulations. So you need to take this seriously. If getting sick or dying is not enough, you could also lose your license. So take it seriously and make sure that you're aware of and stay current on all the rules. And that is all that I have. So are there any questions? Do you see any questions, Kelly?
Hey, Dave. No, I don't see any questions in the Q&A section yet, but if anybody has any, please go ahead and post them. I thought I might just give you a quick prompt. I don't know if you want to stop the screen share or not there, Dave, but you know, there's a lot of talk about printing documents, and from what I've heard, the best thing to do, or maybe we're regulated to do it now, is to provide everything electronically. Can you touch on that?
Yes, one of the rules, we didn't cover it because it's not directly related to the form, but one of the rules well, it is on a couple of forms. One of the rules in the regulations now is you can leave no printed material to be picked up in the premises. The concern is that you touch it, it's contaminated, somebody comes by and picks it up, they get the contamination. So the rule is you can leave no printed information in the property for prospective purchasers to pick up. So I guess that would mean not even business cards.
Yep. Thank you for touching on that, Dave. I know a lot of us are in the practice of leaving business cards. I've even seen a handful out there showing myself. Make sure you're not utilizing any paper products out there, guys. It's really important. We do have one question that came in, Dave, and I'm glad it was asked, and I'd love to hear your answer. So what happens if the property is vacant and it is pending?
Property is vacant and what?
Vacant and pending. It's pending sale.
Are those
Does that change? Does it change the regulations if the property is vacant, or does it change the regulations and requirements if the property is pending?
No. No.
Yeah.
If you go back and look at the form for well, let me go all the way back up to the beginning here. Oh, I'm sorry. I went all the way back. I said I was going to go back to the beginning, and I did, and that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to go back to the beginning of the COVID forms. Okay, so if you look at the form here, you can see here that in the modification of the listing agreement, you can see first in the section here, property showings, this is where the seller agrees to the Pds Forum and also agrees to the BPP. And then down here is marketing activities, and this is authorizing what you're allowed to do. as far as marketing activities, you can't do any of these things unless the seller gives you the authorization to do it. So if you're going to do any of these things going into the property, you need to have the seller's authorization specifically. And then second is down here, the agreement of the seller to allow you to do all of the things that are listed there, to go into the property to do your AVID, go into the property to, to tent it or things like that. None of these things have anything to do with whether the property is pending or whether the property is occupied. All the same rules apply across the board. For instance, if you have a property that is pending and the purchaser has executed the Pds Forum on the day that they were looking at the property, and now it's a week later and they're in contract on the property and they want to go back to the property and do another walkthrough. They want to go back and measure for drapes. They want to go back and whatever reason, they need to execute a new Pds Forum and transmit it to the listing broker before they enter that property every time they enter that property. Because their representation a week ago that they were not sick or not been exposed to anybody is no longer applicable. They need to execute a new Pds Forum that says, on this day when I'm entering the property, I'm not currently sick and I have not been exposed to anybody that had diagnosed with coronavirus within the past 14 days. So if the buyer goes into the property on one day, they've executed the Pds, they got the CVS code, they go around and they look at other properties and they say, we think we kind of like that second one. Let's go back and take another look at it. They're still good because it's the same day. Their Pds works. If they want to go back the next day, they have to do a new Pds, saying that on that day as well, they are certifying that they're not currently sick and they have not been exposed. So every time you enter the property, unless you're going back multiple times on the same day, every time you enter the property requires a new Pds.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. I know we're getting over our time here, so I think we've got a couple that you can answer fairly quickly here, Dave. What happens when a buyer's agent schedules a home inspection? The listing broker receives the Pds for the home inspector, but the buyer's agent or buyer allow other vendors into the property without their knowledge.
Better hope nobody gets sick. Better hope a complaint doesn't get filed with DRE. The listing broker can always file a complaint with DRE because you've clearly violated the DRE regulation. You could be disciplined by DRE for doing that. So, we just have to do this stuff right. I am glad when I got into business 42 years ago that I was with a broker that said there's only one way to do things in real estate the right way. And I've always done it that way. People that are always looking for shortcuts, sooner or later are going to pay the price of using those shortcuts. You just have to know the rules and you have to do them right.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. And last but not least, when will the updated RLA be available on zip forms?
It's there. It was available on Tuesday.
Yep. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate your time this morning.
Wait, hold on a second. Yes, that question, I was thinking RLA-CAA. They were talking about the new non-COVID forms. Usually it is the last Monday of June. I haven't heard a date yet being released, but typically it is the last Monday in June. So whatever the day that day is, that way they get to upload and make the changes over the weekend. So I anticipate that the last Monday in June, which I think is the 28th? 29th. I believe that's the day, but I haven't seen that made official yet by them. As you can tell, they've been a little busy with forms down there right now. The priority was getting all the COVIDs up there. So now that they're up there as of June 2nd, I think they've still got enough time to make the June 29th date.
Great. Thank you, Dave. We appreciate your expertise. We appreciate the update that you've given us. Thanks to all of you who joined in this morning. We certainly are grateful that you were here with us. Stay safe out there. Take care of each other. Stay involved. And we will see you July 31st at 9:30 a.m. for the Metrolist speaker with Bill Miller. Have a good week, everybody.
Thank you, Kelly. Great job.